Hello, everyone, and welcome to South Asian Artists in Conversation with Gitika Buttoo. Thank you so much for joining me today. We're going to be speaking a little bit about your work as a theatre director. So if you could just introduce yourself and tell everyone a bit about yourself.
Yeah, so I'm Gitika. I'm a theatre director. I'm based in the Northwest at the moment. I'm originally from Leeds, though. Make work nationally, predominantly theatre stuff, and also a little bit of television as well, which is something that I'm trying to make more of.
Amazing. And how did you initially get into directing?
So it was a little bit by accident because I started off, well, I actually was an IT consultant before I did anything to do with theatre, which is very random, but very Daisy of me at the same time. But I left that and my degree was actually in drama. So I was always interested in telling stories, but didn't really know what a theatre director was. Left consultancy, and it was actually a bursary that came up through the JMK Trust, which was to be a trainee assistant director. And I didn't really know what one was, but I just wanted to get working into theatre and to get back into that industry. And after assisting a few directors at Leeds Playhouse, which was where I was based, I just completely fell in love with the idea of that job. And that was something you could do. You could have kind of a say over how it looks aesthetically, but also how it sounds, how it feels, how the actors portray emotion. And then I started doing a lot of work with young people, and a lot of work with youth theatres. And I still do that work today. It really fuels my practice, to be honest. I really like to make stories with not trained professionals, if you like. I think they offer so much, and it really informs my practice, and it just keeps you grounded as well, because I think there can be a lot of faff sometimes in the industry, especially with directors, in the way that we talk and the way that we kind of get ideas across and try and get ideas out of people. And actually storytelling is really simple, and storytelling is so beautiful in that way. It's so accessible, and it should be accessible. So that's how I started my journey.
So it kind of forces you to adapt your directing style depending on who you're working with, if it's professionals who've been around for ages or younger kids and stuff. So probably makes you develop more as a director as well.
Yeah, it does. But then actually, after years of doing it now, I had two different styles almost. I was like, oh, I've got one style when I work with young people. I've got one style when I worked with experienced professional actors. And now my style and practice has just morphed into the same thing. I don't ever treat any room differently now, because I think there's a big, I used to feel really insecure as a director early on because I couldn't use fancy words. I didn't have a very, brilliant degree from a great university, if you like. And I didn't feel as clever as other directors that I'd assisted. And actually, when I realized that it's not about the language that you use, it's about the language that you're, looking at together and analysing together, that's the important thing. I started just being myself and started speaking in the same way and communicating in the same way as well.
Amazing. And did you, I know you sort of said you accidentally fell into it, but did you kind of always know you wanted to do it, or it just literally happened randomly?
I think after I knew what it was, I completely made a beeline for it and was like, this is what I have to do, because I don't see myself doing anything else. And that sort of ambition kept me going and kept me applying for things, because it also can get really comfortable if you get into paid positions in theatre, and there's a lot of them out there, especially for theatre practitioners making work with young people. You can get permanent jobs, and it can be quite nice and comfortable because you can pay your rent and you pay bills on time. But I did have to keep pushing myself, and that's why I went freelance about 3 or 4 years ago, so that I could still do that work, but also go off for 3 months and make a professional show somewhere at a different theatre. And trust me, it's hard, as you know, it's some months are really brilliant and yeah, great, and some months it's famine, but like that's kind of, I suppose, the nature of our work sometimes.
Yeah. It's just the life of a freelance. There's going to be times where like everything's at once, and then there will be just quiet and stuff. So you just gotta like
Ride away.
yeah. Moving like into the next question, what was your experience as a staff director working at the National Theatre on Father and the Assassin? Because that's amazing, and that was an amazing show, by the way. And I think it's
Oh, did you see it? I'm so glad you got to see
yeah,
it.
yeah. I went to see it. I was like, I have to see it, and like for like the National Theatre to do that kind of play as well, I thought it was incredible. What was that whole experience like for you?
Yeah, it was such a brilliant experience. It was really, I mean, to make work at that scale for the Olivier was like one thing in itself. You know, how do you tell a story at that scale? But then to be staff directing under someone like Indu Rubasengam, who, you know, for me is such an idol. She's a South Asian woman. She's doing it. She's making things. She's brilliant. Was an incredible learning opportunity. But for me, first and foremost, it was about, I just felt charged up because I was in a room with so many South Asian creatives, actors, you know, designers, directors, and for us all to just come together and have like a bit of a short, what's the word? A bit of a, you know, when you don't have to explain yourself, you have a bit of a way of talking.
You kind of this reminds me of the I did an interview with Anjali Mara, and we both said you kind of felt like you just don't have to like explain yourself, and everyone kind of knew and understood. So it was probably a bit easier, you know, kind of.
Yeah, completely. But then also in the same breath, a real challenge because a lot of us were British Asian, right? And this was written by a playwright from India. It's very much about, you know, topics that have happened to India and that are influencing India right now. So we all had to really educate ourselves and not assume that we know just because we're brown. And I think that was really important in the making of the show.
Yeah, I think that that's so important when sort of, especially telling stories that have happened, you need to make sure that you know the facts and everything are right. So it's like I think people don't realize how much actually goes into it. You just sort of see it for what it is. And so was the sort of most of the creative team South Asian as well?
Yeah, I think let me have, as in like designers, etc., etc. Yeah, I'd say it was a good 60-40.
Yeah,
So
okay, that's great.
60% were of South Asian descent of some kind, which again really informed the world of the piece. And I mean, the music was absolutely incredible. And that was composed by a guy, a South Asian guy who's super talented, but who like made the score for, it was some like Amazon Prime show that did really, really well. But he's because of his heritage and the palette of instruments that he had, it just opened up a whole new level to the story that we didn't have in the rehearsal room. As soon as it was added on top, we were like, wow, this is like big. It feels cinematic.
Yeah, no, I think that that's important. You had like that voice in there because I think a lot of the time it's obviously amazing having, you know, the cast majority is South Asian, but I think one of the problems seems to be like behind the scenes, there's not enough or we're not being used, and you know, we need behind the scenes to basically serve the voice for what people see. So I think, yeah, that's a massive step forwards for that. And what was the response like from people watching that? Was it?
Yeah, it was good. It was, I can't believe how many South Asian people in London came to watch it. Well, I can and I can't, do you know what I mean? But it was packed out every day and every night. We did 2 show days for like 3 months. And it was received really well, people, but also like a lot of the white people that came to watch it when I went out in the interval just to sit and listen, because that's something I like to do.
Okay.
It was opening so many conversations between people, and lots of sort of white families were talking about history that they had no idea about, and how the British were a huge part of India's story at that time, and almost kind of like taking not individual responsibility, but kind of knowing that Britain had a huge part to play in all of that. It was great to see, and especially how many young people came to watch it as well. I think it's so important for people to know their history.
Yeah, no, definitely. Like I felt like even watching it, I felt ignorant at times because there was so much that there were so many gaps in my knowledge. I didn't realize all of that happened, and it's like sometimes the best way is to do it through art as opposed to what everyone's used to. And yeah, it's just it makes you realize the actual power that has that people don't kind of realize.
Yeah, it's so true. And that was actually such a huge point in the rehearsal room when we were making it, because Anupama, who wrote it, she was doing a lot of the rewrites in the room. So it was very, it had lots of R&Ds, but because we wanted it to be perfect, we were making sure that it was being edited and kind of worked on as we were going through the rehearsal process. And that was a huge point that came up, because it was like, actually, we don't know a lot of our own history to do with the politicians at that time, and there's huge gaps in huge gaps in our knowledge, but then not in Anubama's, because she's Indian, like she's lived there and they know their history. And it was kind of like it was a fine balance that we needed to make, because it was like we don't want to spoon feed people, but you also want to make sure that we're doing a good job in telling the story and there's no gaps, so that everybody understands God's journey. So that was a real challenge, and something that we kind of like, it was a bit of a ride through rehearsals to get that right. And I don't know if we did get it right. I'm sure every audience member has a different opinion, but we definitely tried.
And I think even with that, it's like you can't, just tell it in one story. There's so much else. It's like we've got so many more plays that we can do. So I think it's as long as you got the important bits out, I think that's like the main thing. And now moving on to like the next question. I know you've done quite a few projects at Oldham Coliseum. I came to watch, actually, it was Love and Stuff, which was I think last year.
Yeah.
If you could just tell us a bit about the projects you've done at Oldham.
Yeah, Oldham Coliseum is such a great theatre. They've really allowed me to make at such a big scale and things that I've wanted to work on. Love and Stuff was one of the first things that I did with them back when we were just coming out of COVID and things were starting to open up again. And we chose the title together. And yeah, it's just a brilliant story by Gitika Buttoo. It's hearty, it's full, and it also gives the opportunity to two South Asian actors to play characters they just wouldn't normally get cast in or play, because they had to multi-role to, I think it's 20 characters between them. And I just really enjoyed working on that. It was really brilliant. And then the other one that I've just done recently was Road by Jim Cartwright, which I think that was one of like my favourite projects that I've made. The company was joyous. It was a really great rehearsal process. And it was really nice to do something not South Asian, if that makes sense. Nice to just do like a white guy's story that's quite well known, and a lot of people, know the characters and know the monologues from it. And it was nice to reclaim the story a bit and still tell it with a bit of a South Asian lens, because obviously that's going to happen by default. But it was one of my favourite plays that I've worked on.
No, I think it's it's interesting you mentioned, because I think there is that pressure to feel like, because we've got that power now to just tell South Asian stories and make it essential to the character. But I think another step forward is when you take that away, and the central theme doesn't have to be about the ethnicity. You can literally just tell whatever, and I think that's so powerful when you have a South Asian voice behind that.
Yeah, especially because that theme, the main one about Road, I don't know if you know it well. I didn't know it that well before I picked it up. But essentially it's about a northern working class town in Lancashire, and you go along this road and you meet loads of different characters who are all going through a similar thing, because everyone's poor, everyone's not got enough to eat, everyone's turning to the bottle. And actually those themes, of course, South Asian families go through that. I think with the intersectionality stuff, it's really challenging sometimes in theatre, because it's like, oh, you can only then talk about race. But actually, South Asian people face being skint as well, and face alcoholism in their families too. And I think even just by casting a character that people can relate to, that's brown, that's going through that, is so powerful.
Yeah, no, exactly, because it's, I think that this, that the time it's set as well, the, you know, the stereotypical thing we think, oh no, it just happens to like white families, but no, it happens to all of us. There's power when it's, you're not talking because it's the race. It's like, no, like it's because of the person and everything.
Yeah.
No, amazing. And going back to like love and stuff, so I know you mentioned that there was like quite I remember watching it and there was so much multi-rolling. Was that really like, because obviously it was only 2 actors, how was that like trying to do that?
It was a lot of fun, but it was very challenging. It was like but mainly fun. The actors that were cast in it were so brilliant. Manav and Kamal, they were just so full of ideas, so full of, I think to do a role like that, you have to take ego out of it and you have to not be scared to look silly. And actually, the moment we stripped that back, because we did loads of like stuff in rehearsals, like games and just, you know, putting on accents, and we were all pretending to be different people. And actually, one of the ways we created some of these characters where we read them, and then I said to Kamal, for example, oh, who does this perfume seller remind you of? Or who could it be that you know? It's a character that already exists. And she was like, oh, probably Gemma Collins. So we were all having a proper laugh and we're like, oh, you do your best Gemma Collins impersonation, you do yours. And then she just proper like, she was Gemma Collins, and it worked. And like, what a recipe that we found during that rehearsal process was actually, a lot of the time with the work that I do, I try to create character organically, and it's something that we create together. But actually with a play like that, you've got such a short space of time. We had 3 weeks to make the show. We had so many characters to do. Going for stock characters like Gemma Collins that already exists was great for them mentally because they could switch quickly. And it was great for me because I could be like, okay, Gemma Collins doesn't work, we'll try someone else. Do you know what I mean? So we had their faces on the walls, and that's how we sprung from each character quickly. And of course, we had a brilliant movement director as well, Grace Golding, who did a lot of the work.
So it's very quite like explorative process where you're sort of finding out what works and what doesn't, and it's quite a lot of like, was quite a lot of improv in that?
Yeah, there was loads of that. And I think it was important that I went in with some ideas of what these characters would feel like, but not a fully formed idea, because I think, not that it wouldn't work, but for us, the chemistry, the way that us three worked, it would have been quite restricting for them because of and it would have been counterproductive, because the stuff that we found in the room came up so organically from their ideas. I wouldn't have been able to think that up on my own on my desk. So I think it was important that we allowed each other to be flexible in what we were thinking and how we read it.
Yeah, no, I think I really like that working style, because I know obviously every director works differently, but I think when you kind of, you know, ask the actor on their thoughts and their ideas, it's like, it obviously they're playing this, so it brings that authenticity. And like you said, there's stuff that you wouldn't have thought of, but that comes from them. I remember when we worked together at Octagon Bolton, the rehearsed reading, I think it was really nice when you kind of left the floor open and asked us what our thoughts are about the characters. And I think it helps bring a different kind of authenticity than if it's just from, you know, the director's ideas.
Yeah, I'm going to turn
no, that's fine.
Keep getting emails, stop it. Yeah, no, I think it's important, and I'm glad that you enjoyed that as well. I think it's important with that director, I'm going off tangent here, but that direct actor relationship, because not every actor likes that. Some actors like to just be told, and that's cool too. And some directors like to just tell, and that makes a really good relationship. So that's one of the things I always ask in auditions, is about how do you like to work? What's your working style? Do you like to spend a lot of time with words, or do you like to get up and just try stuff? Because once I know authentically what you like, I'll be able to tell if we'll get on for 3 weeks.
That's amazing you do that, like from the audition process, actually, because I feel like most people would just do it when it starts, but then like you said, you've got to get on and have that relationship for however long you're working. So I think that's really great that you ask people what their style is, because there are other actors who just like to be told and that's how they work, but then it's
and also my fear is if I waited too long, or if I said in auditions, this is how I like to work, how do you like to work, I'd be scared that someone is just going to tell me what I want to hear because they want the job. And actually, that, like, it's like actors have so much power as well. I think it's about remembering that as an actor, it's up to you whether you want to work with me too.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like, you might hate the way I work, therefore you probably shouldn't take that job. Obviously, exactly. I understand people have bills to pay as well.
Yeah, no, I get that. Yeah. Gotta enjoy the process as well.
Yeah.
That kind of like actually feeds in. Well, I know we covered it a little bit, but what because you've obviously worked on different projects, and we spoke about you've worked with younger people as well. What would you say is like the best thing about working with so many different creatives?
I think it's just great to know to learn from people's practice and from their experience.
Yeah.
And sharing ideas. I genuinely really buzz off collaboration. Like, that really gets me going. I hate to be a dictator. Don't get me wrong, sometimes in a room you have to be, when it's going badly or whatever. But like, from the inception of an idea, I really love collaboration. And actually, people, like, I'm working with actors who have done a lot of screen sometimes, right? And I've done predominantly theatre. So I learn a lot from them about detail and, how they get characters quickly rather than spending a week trying to develop something. But then I might work with someone who's done so much theatre. They've done a lot of theatre outside, and they've done a lot of work with, immersive theatre that can inform the way that we tell a story, like Road, for example. We did a lot of promenade stuff. So we broke the fourth wall, and we did a lot of the scenes out in the bar, outside the theatre, someone having a fag and like talking to you with a pool cue. And actually that just came about from collaboration. Yeah, I had an idea in my head that I wanted it to be out and I wanted the audience to come in, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But it was only from learning from people's experience of going, I went to watch this show, or I was in this show and this didn't work because of this, but this really worked because of that. And that, I just love that, because it's only ever going to elevate the story that we're making together.
You're sort of constantly getting inspiration and more ideas just from working with people, and that obviously sort of builds you up as a director, and you get more, I guess, life experience from learning from others.
Yeah, it's so important to put your ego aside, because like, just because someone's worked in theatre for 20 years doesn't mean their opinion is more than someone who's worked in theatre for a year who's a graduate. Like, I genuinely think everybody has something to offer, and that's really important.
Yeah, and why people should stay a little bit open-minded, because I get it, because it's like, if you're so used to a certain style and it's worked before, you're going to want to, but at the same time you don't know what someone's idea could do for your show and what it can produce, like you said with what happened with Road.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's really important.
Amazing. And I asked like some people to like send in some questions, and obviously I like to speak about representation in these chats, and the question that they sent in was, do you still think there are barriers for South Asian artists, and how do you think that we as South Asian creatives can help to overcome those barriers?
Yeah, it's a great question, and yes, unfortunately, from my perspective, I do think there is still barriers. I mean, I see it very much as like a bit, and trying to be egoless. I was thinking about this in the shower just before this. I was like, I could also be a barrier without me even knowing it. Subconsciously being a director, being a gatekeeper, someone that is able to cast creatives, employ creatives and employ actors. And I do try to make sure that with everything that I do, casting and creative wise, I'm working with different people. I'm trying not to work with the same creatives, even though it's comfortable and it's nice and you have a working relationship. Colorism's a huge thing I'm reading up on, especially as a light-skinned South Asian person, the biases that I will have. So making sure that with casting, I'm always checking myself. I'm always trying to educate myself to make sure that there's no unconscious bias creeping in. But I think I can do more. So I think for other directors, for other gatekeepers, if you like, I think it's about continuing to educate yourself, pushing yourself, and speaking to people, and making sure that your networks of people is constantly growing, and you don't get comfortable. But I also think, and I think actors have a really hard time. Again, I can't speak from an actor's perspective, but it must be so awful, constantly being cast into stereotypes, and trying to break out of that when actually you don't have much control per se with the stories that are being programmed. And that's similar to me as a director, because sometimes I do only get cast on the Brown show, and sometimes a show comes with creatives attached to it. I don't know if you knew that or not, but sometimes like, here's a show and here's a lighting designer that we already promised a project to back then. And that can be difficult, because then it's like, oh, before you know it, you've got a whole team of white people, and it's like, I didn't have any say over that. And from the outside, it can be like, well, why have they chose to work with X, Y, and Z? And I think as I'm getting more experience in this industry as a director, I'm pushing back to venues and I'm saying, no, I'm not happy with that. I need to have sign off over everybody. Having those uncomfortable conversations when it comes to casting, because a lot of the time programmers, they're not diverse teams, so they don't think about things twice. And it's like, oh, we've got a brown person in this spot, so then the other three creatives or white, actors can be white. And actually it's like, well, no, because I might want everybody to be from the global majority. And every show that I do, I try and do a 70-30 split. So I try to do 70% global majority if I can with the show. But anyway, I'm going off tangent.
No, I think
question. Yeah,
no,
it was but I think, and I'll speak from my perspective as a director. I think for other directors, other South Asian directors and creatives, just pull each other up, because there's a lot of times in the industry I go down to work in London, I'm like, oh, this is so cliquey, and everyone's, chatting shit about each other, and it's like, oh, there's lots of competition between us, and they got this job, and we need to really be on the same page, because we're going to be stronger together. And I think that's a huge thing, is just rally for each other's work, go and support each other's work, go and see things when you can. And whoever's got influence and some kind of say, if you get into a building, make sure you're pushing people, even though it's uncomfortable for you. But if you have one uncomfortable conversation, it's going to make for one less uncomfortable conversation for the next person. And that's important.
Yeah, and thank you. I feel like I picked up on like so many amazing points that you made, but that's so true, because it can be hard, especially when you feel like you don't have as much power and you're not a gatekeeper. But I think, like you said, sometimes it just takes that one conversation and it can open so many doors, because that conversation's already been had. And I think like it's definitely got better, but what I've kind of noticed is that the community within like us as creatives, there's still like lots of work that needs to be done. And I feel like lockdown seemed to help with that. I think just because everyone, or personally, that what I found was everyone had that breathing space to find those connections a little bit more. And like before, I barely knew any South Asian creatives, and over lockdown I connected with so many more. And I think we can only like pave the way for each other more if we support each other. Whereas I get why that competition is there, because of how the industry is, and there is
it's made put there.
Yeah, and it's not our fault. It's the way we're made to feel, because there's not enough opportunity. So we're like, I've got to get that. But at the same time, it's like when someone's on screen, that's just going to pave the way for more. So it's hard, but it's just changing that mindset to be like, when one of us succeed, we all succeed.
Can I also ask a question genuinely? Because with agents for actors, right? Because I only ever speak to casting directors, and I get lists on my table. So I am just wondering, say if there's a play of Cinderella happening, right? And you see the casting call, can you push your agent to be seen for Cinderella, even though the casting requirement isn't specifically South Asian, for example? Can you do that?
I personally not so like if for example if I see something and the role doesn't specify like what
Ethnicity, yeah.
in my head I'm like, well, that means that they're quite open and they're looking for whatever. So if I was to see that, I'd be like, oh, could you put me up for this, because it's not specified what they want. Yeah, so I would say that to my agent. And before I was like, because obviously how it is a Cinderella, they'll probably want someone white, but then if it doesn't specify what they're looking for, then
They
it
should be
kind of,
pushing you out for that.
yeah,
Yeah.
guys.
No, I think it's, I mean, it's getting a lot better. It
Yeah,
wasn't the best when I first started. It's getting a lot better now,
yeah,
but things like that is like sometimes, unless I specify what ethnicity I want, I'm not going to get them as part of the casting
yeah,
list.
really,
And I have to, yeah, and sometimes I have to really push for that. And that's frustrating because I'm like, it's doing you guys as actors a disservice because sometimes you're not getting put in, do you know what I mean, in
yeah,
places that you should be. Not always, and you know, a lot of casting directors are brilliant and they're, you know, really advocating for good practice and good work. But I just think that maybe that's something else as well. Just push your agents because they're getting part of your fee, right? Make
yeah,
sure that they're doing a good job for you and that you're
yeah.
getting being where you should be.
No, definitely. So what? So you found that you get more like response when you like specify
Yeah,
ethnicities as opposed to like open.
yeah,
Okay, that's really interesting actually, because it should be the thing where it doesn't mention it, but I think
exactly.
we're
It
also
doesn't
used to,
all the
yeah.
time.
I think it is getting better, but I think people just need to know that if it's open, then you shouldn't be afraid to like put yourself forwards for that. And yeah, hopefully more actors will learn from that. Something else that I think in the industry, I think people can be quite quick to judge, like you said, how sometimes you're handed the cast and you know it was all right and that wasn't your decision. Um, it sort of reminded me of have you seen Never Have I Ever?
Never have I ever. Is that the show on Netflix?
Mindy Kaling show.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So what it kind of I know that Mindy got quite a lot of like backlash because it was just like it felt like it was like stereotypes and like not everything was covered, but then it's just like you can't you can't cover like every single topic, you know, within one show. And the whole point of the show was it was about, you know, a young girl in school going through all of her problems in school. So I feel like I think Mindy, like you just got to do the best you can with what you have, and I think that's what Mindy did. Like she got the points that she wanted to, but I'm sure there's so much more she wants to show. But it's like we're not given enough opportunities to show everything. So I think when you had that, you obviously tried to make the best you could with what you were given at that time. And I think
Yeah.
it's people don't realize that.
Yeah, there's a lot of pressure. And it's so frustrating because it's like I would love to be able to direct a show and have so much privilege that you don't have to think. Do you know what I mean? It don't even enter your mind. It's like I'm making this because I want to make, I don't know, I just want to make a story for the sake of it. But I feel like everything we do automatically is political just because of our identities, isn't it?
Yeah,
And whether you choose it or not, it becomes political. And yeah, I think it's just, I think it's important that we remind ourselves that that work that we're doing and the graph that we're doing is to try and help future generations and make it a little bit easier. Um, but to, like you say, not try to put too much pressure on yourself because at the end of the day, you're getting the pay the same as your white counterpart, and they don't have any of that to think about. Does that make sense?
yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it's like we can only do so much basically, and the best that we can. No, that's really I think a nice thing to like end on. And I think I could talk about this topic for ages, and there's so much to speak about and there's so many conversations to be had, but I think it's looking like it's going in a good direction. It's just going to take
Definitely.
time and effort for everyone. We're going to move into some like fun fire on
Okay,
questions.
yeah, let's do it.
These are just super random. Okay, sweet or savory?
Sweet.
Do you have a sweet tooth?
Yeah, massive. Massive that I've got so many fillings in my mouth. It's not a vibe. My dentist is really not my best friend.
Yeah. I was speaking to my flatmate about this, and she was like, "She's savory." I was like, "No, sweet."
Absolutely not.
Okay. Would you rather go back in time or forwards into time?
Backwards. Yeah, 100%. Because I'm scared of the future, man. Big time. It scares me.
Just not knowing what's going to happen. Imagine just going in and then you go back and you know what's going to happen. Yeah, I wouldn't.
Yeah.
What's your favorite season of the year?
Season of the year, I'm going to say summer.
Yeah,
Get that D. It's important.
no, we need it. Your favorite drink?
Alcoholic or non-alcoholic? 'Cause that's a very
One of both. One of both.
okay. So alcoholic, I'm going to have to go for a Godfather, which is a drink that I only just discovered recently,
Okay.
right? So it's, do you like Dr. Pepper?
Yeah, I do. I do.
So if you put a shot of amaretto, a shot of whiskey, and then the rest Coke, it tastes exactly like Dr. Pepper, and they
Oh
are
my God.
beautiful. It's dangerous, but that's probably my favorite alcoholic beverage. And then
On holiday.
non-alcoholic, I'm just gonna go for a Coke Zero. Very underrated.
Can't go
Yeah.
wrong with that. It's
Not
refreshing.
the wrong
Did you have
one.
a Goldfather on holiday? Did you discover that one?
Do you know what? I didn't because well the holiday that I'd just been on was Dubai, so we did a lot of
Oh, yeah.
shisha
Oh,
rather than rather than drinking. But the one I discovered that drink on a brunch in Leeds randomly. And I was like, yeah, I'm gonna have this all the time.
I need to try that. Final one, I like to ask everyone this. What advice would you give to your younger self?
Oh, that is such a good one. Um, I would say just keep it's really cheesy, but just
No,
keep
go for it. I love
keep dreaming big, and no dream is too big. Um, and just make sure that you're surrounding yourself with good people with on good frequencies.
amazing. No, I feel like no cheesy, but I feel like that's true.
Yeah.
That's something that everyone can take back with them. That's flown by. I feel like these interviews always go so quick, and I feel like there's always so much to talk about. But no, I think we've discussed like quite a lot, and thank you so much for joining me today and sharing all of your insights and how you got into diary writing and everything.
Thank you.
Amazing, it's been a pleasure. I'll let everyone know when this chat will be posting. And there's quite a few more guests coming up, so I'll be excited to introduce those. Thank you so much and bye.
Bye.